All right. I told you this was going to be fast. So if you want to, I know some people are kind of standing up for a second, but if you want to come back this direction, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. So I'm gonna talk over the roar of the crowd and the coffee. And in some ways, this Dr. Timmins and I, Lydia, we know each other. We are part of the same neighborhood pool, which is a very Delaware thing. I did not know until I moved to Delaware. So this is going to be a moderated conversation with two folks who do some phenomenal work, particularly using documentary work to tell stories and perspectives. And it struck me that they're Ben and Ben. And you all figured out some naming scheme that makes...
Yes, we've got it. That's what I do as a producer. I've renamed them.
So yeah, so Lydia is a producer, a faculty member here in the Department of Communication, and a great friend and a colleague. So I'm going to turn it over to her for this session called Documenting Reality, Telling Real Stories of People and Communities. And there are going to be some clips from both of their work. So look forward to that in just a minute.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining us. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're all hitting that little slump right in the middle. So get your coffee. And be ready for really interesting conversation about documentaries. So let me introduce Ben Stillerman, is a South African documentary filmmaker who's been working in the USA since 2011. He uses a camera as a way to have better conversations, specifically with people who may think differently to him. In 2023, he founded the Social Cohesion Lab, a nonprofit focused on using media to bridge divides in conjunction with a documentary series about climate change opinions. So he's Ben Stillerman. Then we have Benjamin Wagner. So this is B Still, and that's B Dubs. So B Dubs focus is the essential nature of our shared human experience, how stories help us navigate adversity, foster connection, and cultivate resilience to find meaning, thrive, and flourish. He penned dozens of features for Rolling Stone magazine before landing at MTV News. He moved to Facebook's news partnership teams, where he helped launch and scale the Facebook Journalism Project, designed and developed global news days and executive summits. And he is the writer, producer, and director of 2 award-winning PBS documentaries, Mr. Rogers and Me, which I am watching, and it is great. I suggest you watch it. And Friends and Neighbors. And he's also a performing singer-songwriter. Yay. So what we would like to do is as you're getting yourselves back seated, is to play the 2 clips from both of their the trailers from their documentaries, and then in a few minutes we'll play specific clips. So I don't know how this works, Tim, but if you can play those, that'd be good. Do you have, there's a clip? There's a...
From our schools.
Up to 14 could be dead.
To our capital. Our grocery stores, highways, and homes.
3 children have been shot.
Americans are anxious, angry, scared, and confused.
Everything from the rising incidences on airplanes of people acting out to the U.S. Capitol. Those are manifestations of unaddressed trauma.
In the new documentary from the brothers who brought you Mr. Rogers and Me, we examine how trauma and stress maladapt our nervous systems, contribute to shallow and complex lives, and drive poor health outcomes in so many of our friends and neighbors. And we, as Fred Rogers so often encouraged us, look for the helpers in post-pandemic America, the people who are healing the anxious and uncertain communities around them.
Everybody has trauma, like in some form or fashion.
Trauma is not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you.
Every time a young person is shot, that's a family that's affected, that's a community that's rocked.
If we do not have recognition of the ills of the past, then we are going to repeat them.
We have to become an America that we have never been. And we have to become so profoundly altered in what we become that we can never again be.
Being willing to be vulnerable and to be vulnerable openly, it has a transformational impact, not just for ourselves, but for each other.
And I feel that if we can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health.
What's mentionable is manageable. And when you look for the helpers, you know that there's hope.
our second one, which is
So I want to be completely honest. I read a survey that said that this county has statistically the least belief in climate change in America. And, you know, that's interesting. But I also don't want to pretend that I know what this county is about just based on that.
Is it false or is it true? Coal and gas and oil, they are polluting the environment. Now, whether it's enough to change the climate of the world, there's very few people I can trust to give me the answers to that.
I believe in climate change. You can see it around you. Do I believe our 2 coal-fired plants are horrible? No.
Is it hotter than you remember when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah.
I think it is.
If man could control this, this whole country would be 70 degrees.
This is a rural area. They like farming. They like having their cows and horses. There's a couple of llamas over there in that field.
We are a very small community that was built on our coal mining and our power plants.
There's a huge disconnect between urban settings and rural counties everywhere in the United States.
It feels like my county and my community and my way of life are being attacked. And I'm trying to help feed those people that are trying to shut me down.
Nothing against city people in that sense, but I'm probably more green than you'll ever be because I have to live with Mother Nature.
So let me do a little experiment for you. Ready?
Okay.
Tom, you're wrong about climate change. It's definitely caused by humans. I'm not a politician. I'm just like a guy who's panicking that people think differently to me. I'm sure about it. Did I change your mind?
No.
Why?
Do you like it when anybody tells you this is what you need to do? Even if you know you need to do it, it still pisses you off.
If you listen to me, I will give you the courtesy of listening to you. And my goodness, we're all human beings. We're going to find some common ground somewhere.
I don't know if I ever come to the truth. And if it's part truth, part lies, you got to hang on to something.
All right, so that's a taste of the trailers of the 2 documentaries we want to talk about. These documentaries are about a conversation. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, what makes a documentary a good format for the messages that you're trying to get out to everyone?
Well, I have a zillion answers, and I won't speak on behalf of all documentary filmmakers, and Be Still is here to add. For me, part of it is in a world, and I've worked across all kinds of media at Rolling Stone, MTV News, Facebook, short form, long form, in between. In a world of short attention span theater, 7 seconds and so forth and less, it's an opportunity to immerse and to take a journey and to meet people that you wouldn't normally meet, and ultimately being a good neighbor, note the word on Ben's shirt, and Fred Rogers, who is really the quiet or secret star of both of my movies. Being neighborly and being a part of a democracy is really about empathy, and I think documentary can be an empathy machine. 70 minutes of immersion in a world and settling into a space somatically, sort of in your body, where you can put the device aside and go to another part of the world or meet some people that you wouldn't otherwise meet, and slow long enough to be curious and maybe learn something that you didn't know that you just can't learn in 7 or 8 seconds.
Yeah, and I mean, thank you, by the way, for having us here. And I think my answer to that would be, my film school mentor said that an interview is a gift given 2 ways. When you interview someone, you're giving them a gift by paying attention. Everyone wants to feel like their story is worth telling and worth hearing. Likewise, so you're kind of giving them a gift by saying, I care, I'm interested, let me listen to you, I want to understand you and understand what you're about and where your beliefs come from and who you are. But likewise, it's a gift given to the interviewer as well, because you get to go on this voyage where you get to, in the same way that we like reading fiction or traveling to Amsterdam or whatever it is, it's fun to go and learn about the world. You know, it's fun to go out and meet people and chat. That's my favorite thing, is to go and chat to someone, you know, because it's by doing that that you get to kind of broaden yourself out. And I think the final version of that is the audience of a documentary or any media that really kind of privileges listening and curiosity, is that the audience gets a chance to go on that voyage along with you.
Yeah, and I think for both of you, this idea of having a conversation, specifically yours, is going to a place where people don't agree. How do you get, I mean, the beauty, I think, of long-form documentary, long-form things is it doesn't have to be a few seconds. I can really have a conversation, and you can play a lot of that conversation.
I mean, can I go further and say it shouldn't be a few seconds? I mean, you know, obviously, you know, it would be nice if I was the crotchety man who said all documentaries should be 12 hours long, you know, and you should be forced to sit and watch it whether you like it or not, you know. But the reality, I mean, we went to go spend 4 months in this small county. We had to, you know, say, okay, we're going to go there with our own opinions, but the goal of what we're doing isn't to try and change people's mind when we get there. The goal is to try and flex the muscles of curiosity and practice listening in order to understand, and it'll take time. You know, and in so doing, we'll prove a certain trustworthiness to the subjects that we're speaking to, that they'll then hopefully pay back by giving us vulnerable, genuine moments.
I mean, Mr. Rogers told us, and we need to listen. We need to be quiet and calm. And how does that work when maybe our friends and neighbors are not so quiet and calm? Maybe they're not willing. How do we use
Well, to me, that's the whole thing. And you haven't seen Friends and Neighbors. It comes out next year on PBS. I've done some premieres locally. But Friends and Neighbors is about mental health, and it ends up that Fred was modeling what's called regulation, right? Self-regulation. So I met him when a couple of decades ago, and I had no expectation of the meeting. My mom was like, you should come meet. Fred Rogers is our neighbor here this summer. You should come. And I was so gobsmacked by how he, show of hands, do we know who Mr. Rogers is? Okay, great, cool. Well, who he was on television, and this guy had the longest running children's series, I would bet continues to today, but you know, something like nearly 1,000 episodes, nearly 30 years. And they were really thoughtfully considered, rendered, shot, and paced. And it ends up that's who he was in real life, because he understood how to self-regulate, which meant how to keep himself calm and how to then make you feel calm. And to me, that's the opportunity, and I certainly experienced that watching your work. And not all documentary plays the same game, as it were, right? Some hypes you up, but my objective has been, particularly as I've learned more about the physiology of what makes that possible and what he was actually doing. But there's a key to democracy in that self-regulation. And you model it so beautifully with levity and patience in those clips, which is you need to slow it down, spend some time, and a lot of the journalists have been talking about inculcating trust by listening. But it's tough to listen if you're in fight or flight from sort of overstimulation. I mean, a lot of us are much of the time, and most of us don't know how to sort of manage that physiological discomfort in their body, and Fred was a master, and he was showing us that for 30 years. So I just try and manifest that in what I make and in how I show up, the more I know about it, because I certainly knew none of it when I met him 20-some years ago.
The other way to think about it that's kind of fun is, you know, it's like a healthy diet, a healthy media diet, you know, like there's nothing wrong with different kinds of media, you know, but like I think a documentary, especially one that like takes its time, is a little bit like All Bran Flakes or something, you know, like it's like good for you. Like it's maybe not like the easiest thing in the world, you know, and I watch plenty of YouTube shorts, and I do the flick too, you know, we all do it. I mean, because it's delicious, right? But like and I often think to myself, like, it's not like everyone needs to eat all bran all day. Like, that's not the goal. The goal isn't that that's all we do. But it's good to, like, do a little bit of it sometimes, right? And I think that's kind of how I think about it, is like, this kind of slower, more deliberate style of media production is good for us, good for our health internally. Even if you're going to eat a pizza afterwards, that's also fine.
We were talking about that earlier.
Twizzlers.
I love Twizzlers, but if I ate nothing but Twizzlers, I'd be a hot mess. I'd be a wreck, right? I also love salad. It's just a different type of experience.
Maybe salad's less. Maybe I should use salad rather than all bran.
Granola's pretty satisfying compared to a Twizzler, and frankly, my stomach doesn't get as upset afterwards. But when I go to see, I took my teenagers to see Thunderbolts on opening night. Like, I'm that guy. I love a Marvel movie. We're watching Andor. But I also try and sit them down for something that might take a little more cognitive engagement or emotional engagement.
And I think that in this summit, we've been talking about how do we get people, the audience, to want to have local news, first of all, just full stop local news, even if it is only 3 minutes long a story. But what are the structures that you were using to get people to want to watch a 70-minute documentary when really they could just flick through a couple 15-second things that would tell them something and they could go on? How does that long form work for you?
Well, it's funny you say that, because this is our second large project. Our first one was a 75-minute documentary, but this project, True, False, Hot, Cold, it's called, we actually decided to do something structurally different to attempt to offer people the opportunity to engage in a slightly different way. We broke it up into 26 short episodes, each about 5 minutes long, each one covering, it's like, they're chapters, each one covering a different topic and spending a little bit of time in a different segment of that community. So we'd talk about the urban-rural divide, and we'd spend some time like at the local butcher, or we did one about the relationship between religion and belief, and on that day we spent some time with the fire department. So we attempted to think about a way to offer the same kind of experience, but understand that people are maybe going to want to watch 15 minutes of documentary content, and that's also okay. They're welcome to watch all 26 episodes. I don't even think my mother's ever done that before, but if they want to, they can watch it. If they don't, then they're welcome to watch 3 and then watch another 2 some other time.
You can have your Twizzlers, and you can have your salad.
Right.
I think of Friends and Neighbors and Mr. Rogers and Me as a part of a universe of means by which I address the same topic. I speak about it. I've got a book we're about to sign a deal on the same topic. It works its way into my day job as a media consultant, my work with the Media Transformation Challenge at the Poynter Institute, which is a journalism institute down in Florida. And of course then, you break it up into sort of bite-sized, if you will, pieces of media. But ultimately my desire, and there'll be a 56-minute version on PBS and a 75-minute version on Apple, Amazon, et cetera. So you do think of it in terms of total runtime, or TRT, a little bit differently. But my hope is always that you can hook people with your lead, or your super cut at the top, your tease, and that you can get folks to lean back, because ultimately I'm advocating for a bowl of granola or a salad here, to overextend my metaphor. We'll leave the metaphor there.
We had lunch already.
I mean, the other way to also think about it is like, it's almost like you have to go to where the audience is looking for that kind of content. Like, we found we run these workshops, like curiosity workshops, basically, where we go to universities and we kind of say, okay, like, how do we flex that muscle of being curious? We do it through documentary. through media outreach, like, are there other ways people could do it? We play, we role play, we do all sorts of fun stuff. But we realized that, like, eventually you kind of have to say, not everyone's looking to be curious all the time. Not everyone's, in the mode of, Tuesday, 9:30, maybe that's not the time for people to be looking for something, curious. A college student, who's like engaged and wants to see and understand the world, these are audiences that you can go after for this particular kind of so I think it's also about kind of finding your audience in a way.
Well, let's take a look. We now have two little about 3-minute clips that they edited from their 2 documentaries. So we saw the trailers before, but now we're going to take a look at the 2 clips. So we're starting with Friends and Neighbors first, and then we'll move to True, False, Hot, Cold.
But feelings aren't facts. They're signals to help us find safety and our way back home to ourselves.
If we're kind to ourselves, then we have a greater chance of being kind toward other people. Because we feel good, we feel hopeful, we feel happy.
Your life is a series of breaths. Stay in the breath, not in the circumstances around it.
When you're having certain thoughts or emotions, just remember that you can reset your nervous system by moving or breathing or connecting with someone you love. That's going to make a big difference.
We all have different assignments in life, and sometimes our assignments change. If you can positively affect one person, you're making a difference. And so we can all make that difference, and that's what this life is about.
The great changes that lead to the masterful transformations all began with one person. Rosa Parks was one person. Abraham Lincoln was one individual. It all began with one person.
The truth is inside of us, and it's wonderful when we have the courage to tell it. Loving people and animals and the world we all live in is the most important part of being alive.
Next one coming up. Is it coming? There's one more. Oh, the other one. Yeah, the other one. I'm sorry, yeah, the other one too, now please.
Different location.
Most things that I get a firm belief about, I have researched, I have received information from friends who research more than I do. Some people just have their nose to the grindstone all the time researching what's going on. They know everything that's said in Washington. Like I said, I'm a news hound. I watch TV a lot and I read the news a lot. So if I form a strong conviction, it's because I've read about it and I just feel in my heart, this is the way it should be.
Well, I don't feel that I'm wrong. That's where I mean, we all feel that way. Like, you feel you're not wrong about what you believe, and the logical thing to me, the most conservative, realistic thing to me is what I believe, I feel is the truth.
I think people don't pay enough attention to what's going on. They're bad lambs, sheep, following the group, paying attention to what's coming down the pike. Oh, they said this. Okay, we're going to do this because it works. Such and such a percentage say it works. Okay, it works. But then you read and you listen to someone who is not a news reporter, is not a scientist, who tells you something entirely different from their own personal experience, and you know in your heart, I get a feeling when something's true and when it isn't. If somebody speaks the truth to me about something important, my hair stands on end. That's my cue. And it's always been that way. So, and that's not a religious thing. That's just, they're telling the truth, or I'll get teary. And I just believe that some of the things that people are experiencing, they're talking about it in the back alleys. They're not being heard, except by a few people who listen and then spread the word.
What about people who pass opinions about things that they haven't done any research on?
Yes, like my grandma always told me, everyone has an opinion and they're all like assholes. They all stink. That's what she always said. Yeah, people have opinions, and they're going to make their opinion known, trying to sway you, whether they know what they're talking about or not. And most people don't know what they're talking about, as far as I'm concerned.
People take their opinions and they almost make that the truth, and it's a shock when they find out that it's not true, because they've put it on this pedestal almost. I think that opinions should just be carried around in a basket and not held on to for dear life. So when you come across differing opinions or something, or a fact that proves your opinion wrong, you can just swap it out of the basket. And I think that's where one of the biggest problems come in. Nobody's willing to swap their opinion basket out. Their opinions are law. That is the truth. And they'll say it's an opinion, but the way they act is, this is true, and nothing will differ from it.
No matter where I get the news, no matter where anyone else gets the news from, it's your choice to believe. Has nothing to do with anybody else but yourself.
All right, so when, as journalists, our job is to talk to people who we may not agree with. So how, again, this format can, many of you talked about how it can heal, how conversation can heal. How does that work when I'm listening to maybe one of those people, maybe I didn't agree with them, although I love the thing about the basket and opinions. I'm like, yeah, just chuck out that opinion that's wrong and put a good one in.
Yeah, I mean, so just by way of a bit of context, I mean, this documentary, rural Utah, statistically very low, very high skepticism about the concept of human-caused climate change, according to some studies done by Yale. And, you know, I wasn't going to go in there and be like, so, you know, climate change, you're wrong about that. Let's talk about it, you know, like, I mean, that wasn't going to work. And also, what's the interesting part there? So I thought, okay, well, what might work is trying to understand, you know, where beliefs come from. Not this specific belief to start. Let's understand how we form beliefs and who we form beliefs with and what it means to change a belief. And you know, our kind of big takeaway from this project that we did was, you know, we sort of feel like the main thing we learned was that beliefs don't form in a vacuum. They form based on the personal experiences of the people and the beliefs of the people that that everyone spends their time with. And once we kind of accepted that in a sort of profound, you know, true way, it was a lot easier to have these conversations without feeling like the first reaction is to correct someone or interject and say, I disagree. And it's not to say that, like, therefore we must allow, you know, anyone to say anything, but it's to say, okay, there might be a time for fact-checking, and, like, that's an important thing to do, you know. But there's also a time for lending a really generous ear and saying, you know, I want to understand that I'm not going to be the editorial right now. I'm going to be a vessel for asking people to tell stories, especially stories from people who don't get asked very often what their opinions are.
Again, I think you're modeling it, right? And you're modeling what Fred was talking about, and hopefully we're modeling it here, which is how can I create enough space between myself and the person I'm speaking to? And curiosity is a practice, right? It's tough to be curious if you're under duress, right? Like, y'all know what hypervigilance is, right? Like, there's an onslaught, 24/7 news cycle, you know, polarization, traffic, cable news, the traumas we have in our family, racism, patriarchy, arguably capitalism, or at least the parts of capitalism that don't think of us as production units, right? Anyway, there's lots of reasons why many of us are under duress, and that makes it difficult to not be on the defensive. What you just showed us, and what I'm trying to do something a little different in the movie. These are all people who are basically trying to tell a story. It's a thesis, and the thesis is we're under duress, and unless we can regulate ourselves, we're not going to be able to make the space that you're showing us with people who have differing points of view. And if we can't close that gap, which current evidence doesn't support, we're doing a terrific job of it, not just what's happening in our state houses and in our capital, but also in terms of the data around mental health, right? Like, Surgeon General the former Surgeon General issued 6 different sort of studies over 3 years. The self-regulation bit is critical for curiosity. Curiosity is critical to build empathy, and empathy is sort of a foundational element of democracy, right? So it kind of adds up. It's like a math equation.
And I think that's what the good documentary, that's the thing, is we create the space. So what you're both talking about is that a conversation can't happen if you're not listening, or if you don't want to listen.
Right, and it's tough to listen in a defensive mode, which most of us don't realize we're in. And not to cast aspersions, you'll recall I worked at Facebook and Instagram, and in fact I was the advocate at MTV News for getting on these platforms and thinking shorter form. But short form content, first of all, is not a moral universe. It's really, there's nothing but conflict. So it's difficult to make any sense of any of it. If it's just a skateboarding accident, and then it's a fire or a car accident, which a lot of, I get some great stuff there, but oftentimes it's really just the conflict. It's just the instant when the man bites the dog or the woman bites the dog. But yeah, it's really, I think about finding that space to practice the listening.
I also think that part of our work as media makers, and this is why I think media makers specifically are uniquely in a good space to do the work of bridging divides, of bridging between different ideologies and communities. Often the work is about, I guess what I would call just framing or setting people up to understand in a way before they get upset. So and I think about how it's got to happen not just once where we go in and have a conversation with someone and we have to make them feel like we're not out to trick them or make them look foolish on camera. That's the first time it's got to happen. And in this case, that was for a sort of I suppose, conservative coded, rural right-leaning community. But it's just as much got to happen if I'm screening this at, a university which has a different set of politics. You almost have to be sure, okay, well, it's still the documentary's job or the media maker's job to frame this for the audience too, because if I just went up straight away and said here's a bunch of people who don't believe in anything about climate change, why don't you watch their opinions for the next 2 hours? Probably people would be like, I've got almost anything better to do. But if we focus it by saying, why don't we start with understanding that these are people, these are humans, they're fun, they're interesting, they make jokes, they're in a pretty part of the world, they have families, they care about things, they get emotional. By the way, they don't have the same beliefs as you, but by the time you understand that, you maybe like them a little bit already. And I think that is kind of where media in general, documentary in particular, is particularly useful at kind of scaling the idea of empathy. We can quickly, at scale, get a sense of different lives happening all around.
Well, in the spirit of that, I want to give people have a chance to ask any questions, because we have 7 minutes left in our little thing here. So, any questions we have? Okay.
Hello. So I'm also a filmmaker, more of a baby filmmaker, I would say. But my question is, I just produced a narrative film that has the same kind of goal. It's about creating empathy for homelessness and people with drug addiction. So I'm getting to the phase of promoting it, distributing it, and I'm wondering, how did you go about getting eyes on it? Because it's one thing to make it, but how do you get people to see it? Was it through TikTok reels to promote it? Were you going to festivals? Like you said, universities? I'd just love to know more about that.
I mean, huge conversation, and one I'm happy to have. I'm sure we both are, and I think there's no single answer anymore. I think there used to be a get to a festival, someone will buy it, and then you say goodbye, and you see it in theaters sometime 3 months later. I just don't think that happens anymore. The way we personally found our audience was by partnering up with a very robust and growing community of what they call the bridge building space. So there's hundreds of organizations regionally, nationally, even internationally, that are focused specifically on ideological bridging. They have audiences, and so we've done work to try and connect with them. If you want to see a huge list, for example, go to Listen First Coalition. They just did a film festival specifically on this kind of thing. Apply and get your film in there. That'll be a good way to start.
I would only add, so that it's more applicable to the whole room, happy to speak later, but I think we often think of our projects as having a narrow lifespan or sort of a moment, and the longer I'm in this space, and I was on the other side of the equation at MTV where we were working with movie studios to try and help them answer the same question in the big movies. But the longer I do this, the more I think of it as a sort of longer lifespan. It can be new to new audiences in new ways over more than just an opening weekend. This isn't Thunderbolts. It's an ongoing dialogue or conversation. There's lots of opportunities on lots of platforms with lots of partners and collaborators to get your story, whatever your story is, and on whatever media you tell it, told, seen, and create the impact that you're hoping to create.
Just one last thought, kind of to Benjamin's point there. I think the other thing to do is to think about what you can offer over and above just a media experience. So live screenings. People want to get together. You know, they want to be in places and talk about some of this stuff. Can you present alongside a lecture or alongside a workshop or alongside some kind of event or something like that? That's something that TikTok doesn't offer.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I'm a senior at UD. And I just wanted to ask, when you went into that town with the woman who was wearing like the red shirt, how did you figure out what town to go to, what people to find, and were people off-put by you, like, and your team kind of coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we found the place, as I say, through a Yale survey that's done every year, Yale Climate Opinion Maps. This county stuck out as truly being one of the most skeptical in the country. There was one in Mississippi, but I was living in Los Angeles, and it was only a 10-hour drive to Utah versus a 40-hour drive to Mississippi, so I chose Utah. And I showed up at the gas station, and I started explaining what I was interested in doing. I went for 2 weeks by myself first before we had a crew, and I met a bunch of people before I started recording, try to sort of prove that I was there with good intentions. And people will surprise you. If you ask someone, please share your story with me, I really am going to listen, I promise, and then you actually show up with a camera and like you really do listen. Firstly, they're flabbergasted. They think that everyone's, you know, full of it. But like, if you actually show up, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I better deliver now, because the whole crew's shown up. I mean, there were only 4 of us, but we showed up. And so people will sit and say, okay, I better provide some truth here, and they'll talk. And if people can sense that you care, they will almost always not disappoint you. That's what we found.
Yeah, I would just plus one that. People like to tell their story, by and large. And once you get them going, and I think it's worth pointing out that you went beforehand to build a relationship without the camera and the infrastructure, gained that trust, and then once you get someone going, the floodgates tend to open.
People want to tell their stories. People do. You want to tell your story. You want to be heard. I mean, so does everyone else. And I think that's a really important part of journalism. That's what we get to do.
And we all have one. And we all have one, and they're all interesting and important, which is something that Fred knew, and why he looked through the camera. It's something that shows in your work, and it's, I think, probably true to what you're learning in J School here. But yeah, man, we all got a story, and people want to share it, because ultimately we're relational beings. This is what we do. We relate. This is how we learn and how we know we're alive, and how we grow.
But I mean, I think this is the form of documentary. I started out in TV news, so like my attention span's about a minute and a half. So, you know, but this idea of having this luxury of time, and as I'm watching both of your documentaries and your work, there's silence in there. It's not filled with music and filled with frenetic activity and filled with things. It's lambs walking across a landscape or a family walking down the street. And so I think by the video or the documentary form allowing the subjects to breathe, allowing the topic to breathe, it can allow the audience also to be able to
There's so much noise, right? And it's just getting noisier. And we all know intellectually, cognitively, that it's good for us to put our devices down and to reflect. And with reflection comes gratitude. And with gratitude, you look around for somebody to thank, right? And when you thank somebody, they feel good, and you begin to make a better world. And so, you know, it takes a second. You need a little bit of silence. You need a little bit of reflection. You need to watch some sheep.
I love the sheep. Yeah. Well, I think I see Tim is approaching slowly, so that sounds like that we are done. Thank you very much for coming and for hearing what we have to say.
Thank you so much.
Round of
Thanks,
applause.
guys.
Thank you. I also decided that if you ever started a band, you could be Lydia and the Bins. So that joke fell flat. All right. Thanks in the back. So we're going to have a break here. We've got the next session is going to be Sustaining Journalism for Democracy. And in so many ways, the conversation we were just having, the ability to tell these long stories is going to be something we'll talk about, and the importance of that in a democracy. So that is going to begin at 3:55. So 15-minute break, and we'll see you back at 3:55. Thank you.